A local filmmaker and his friends traveled across the Atlantic to tell the story of the 8th Infantry Division during World War II.
They traveled last year to Europe to retrace the Army infantry's steps. Now they've taken their journey and made it into a documentary called Following the Golden Arrow. Ben Atkinson, director and producer of the film, is here to talk about the story. Thanks for being here this morning, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Now, the 8th Infantry was very involved in that war. What did they do while they were in Europe?
Well, they actually landed at Utah Beach on Normandy on July 4th, 1944, so it was a few weeks after D-Day. Then they moved down through France, helping along the Western Front there.
Okay.
And then they finished up over in Germany, northern Germany, with the liberation of a concentration camp.
Now, your grandfather was a captain in the 8th Infantry, and your inspiration to do this, why?
Well, growing up, he would always tell me stories about the war, and one of my favorite things to do is when we actually would go up in the attic at my grandparents' house, and he had his old footlocker there, and we would go through it, and he had all sorts of, artifacts from the war, and he'd tell me stories, and as I grew older, his stories would get, more details and a little less censored, I would say, until he would kind of give me the full picture, and I just always thought it was so amazing, and, growing up, watching movies like Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan, just the love for the history of World War II, and I was just concerned that a lot of that history gets lost as more people we're losing more of them every day, really, and I just really wanted to preserve it for everyone and for my family.
How cool of you to actually do that.
Yeah.
I saw this footage that you're watching now, and what a job well done.
Thank
it's
you.
Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how did you go about starting this process?
Well, we started a few years ago. It was something I'd always kind of wanted to do, and I have some friends that work in film, and we kind of got together and talked about it and said, this would be a good thing to do, and as a documentary, I think, we could do it for a little bit less money and a little bit easier because you can kind of just go do it. So I interviewed my grandfather. We went through all of his pictures that he had, and I just kind of sat him down, and he just told me story after every picture to kind of get a better picture. And then back in the mid-90s or so, he self-published sort of a memoir about his time, and that was a great resource for us because you hear these stories and you write them down, but still being able to go back and read his own words, that makes a huge difference.
Right.
So we had that, and then we also had his war diary that he kept in case he was worried that he wouldn't make it back home, so he kept some pretty detailed notes in there to give to my grandmother in case he never made it back, so at least she would know what he'd been up to.
Yeah.
Now, how long were you there?
So we were in Europe for a little over 2 weeks. Last August, we flew into Frankfurt and drove from Frankfurt all the way out to Normandy, which is about 12 hours, I think it was. It was a brutal day because we flew internationally out of Atlanta to Frankfurt, long flight, barely slept because it's hard to sleep on an airplane.
Sure.
And then got in a car and drove for 12 hours all the way back out to the end of France.
That sounds brutal.
We're exhausted, and then after that, it was just non-stop for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Worth it, though. What was it like to be able to know that your grandfather was there?
It was amazing. In the beginning at Utah Beach with Normandy and D-Day, that was a pretty powerful place, of course, because, the sacrifices that were made there. And he landed a few weeks after that, so that wasn't part of him. That was a little different for me. But as we moved through, we actually had a lot of really good photographs that the doctor in their group had a camera, and he was a photographer, and he would set up a darkroom at his aid station throughout Europe, kind of behind the lines. So we had these really good quality photographs that were taken of my grandfather and other people. So we actually went and replicated a few of them with me standing in the exact same spot. And that was just insane for me, because it felt like I was standing right next to him. And it's crazy to say, but it makes me think that I kind of was there with him and experiencing that, even though I was totally safe. But it was also great to see how just beautiful everything is, and imagining how terrifying it would have been 70 years ago.
Yeah. Now, we're almost out of time, but I have to ask real quick, what's next for the film? DVD, film festivals?
Yeah, so it's premiering at the Cinema Center on June 6th at 7:30, and then there's going to be a follow-up showing on June 7th at 2:30. Then we'll be putting it out to DVD and hopefully getting on Netflix and on our website as well.
Okay, cool. You need some help with production costs, too.
Yeah, so we raised some money through Kickstarter, and we funded a lot of it ourselves, but we're hoping to kind of recoup some of those costs through a lot of interest. We've had some good support from the veterans in the 8th Infantry Division, too. So cool.
Thanks for sharing your journey with us. If you're interested in finding out more about the film or looking at some pictures and video clips, you can like Following the Golden Arrow on Facebook or go to followingthegoldenarrow.com.